Nigeria's leadership recruitment process is being put to test again as the general elections draw closer, with internal party elections expected to begin among political parties next month that will eventually throw up candidates for citizens to elect. In a succession presidential election and governorship polls in many states, electing the right candidates to tackle Nigeria's huge socio-political and economic challenges in the next 4 years is at the heart of the polls. Now, analysts are asking Nigerians to become active and not passive by taking the right steps to elect credible leaders in 2023. Now, the issues of competence, merit, track record, and the viability of strong leaders that will stabilize the Nigerian state away from the fractured country, which is currently being bedeviled by insecurity, high unemployment, hunger, and fears of destabilisation, are increasingly being brought to the attention of citizens for them to make the right political and electoral decisions. Now, will a president emerge from the two biggest political parties in the country, or will there be a paradigm shift in leadership choice away from the APC and the PDP? We'll be speaking with analysts on what exactly Nigeria needs in a leader and whether such a leader can emerge from outside the two dominant political parties. I'm Sumner Sambo, and this is the Arise interview. A very warm welcome to you and happy Easter to all our viewers wherever you're watching us from across the world. Now, 7 years ago, Nigerians rallied behind the All Progressives Congress and its mantra of change to elect President Muhammadu Buhari as a better choice to the then administration of Goodluck Jonathan and the People's Democratic Party. It became the first time a party in power had failed at the polls, and all expectations were on the incoming administration to change things drastically. Well, 7 years gone. Nigeria and Nigerians have been scarred by a plethora of issues, situations that have remained with them, from sheer negligence of the police and armed forces to banditry, kidnappings, terrorism, and other shades of criminality that are wider than ever before. Now, the economic woes and soaring inflation have also worsened endemic poverty, as more Nigerians dropped below the poverty line in the last 7 years. Nigerians are now looking to 2023 for another fresh start as the country's leadership recruitment process is being put on the spotlight. As the political class is warming up, our political citizens and keen observers of Nigeria's polity say there is the need for a new political atmosphere in the country, which is more patriotic and dedicated to solving the multiplicity of problems facing the nation. Can this variety of issues push Nigerians to elect a different crop of politicians? How do we recruit better political leaders as Nigerians? Can a paradigm shift be witnessed in the forthcoming general elections? Well, without a doubt, the road to the 2023 general elections will be daunting, but it is important for Nigerians to pay attention to the leadership recruitment process. Joining me now to discuss this is Arise Analyst Dr. Amadi, who is also an Associate Professor of Law, and just beside him I have Frank Tietie, who is a lawyer and Arise News Analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And today we're doing what's known as solutions journalism. How do we recruit better leaders? How do Nigerians get the right set of people that will actually live up to the expectations of the founding fathers of the country? And I start with you, Professor Sam Amadi. Well, we tried that in 2015, but here we are.
Well, there are two ways to look at it. One is, if you want to be technical, we can talk in terms of first, a job description. So the question is diagnosis. What's wrong with the country? Many people think maybe in a feeble sense or superficially, Nigerian job problem is, or maybe get a younger leader, maybe we get a PhD. Until Jonathan came, the notion was that we never had a regraduate in university graduate as president, and we got Jonathan. Of course, Yaradua was the first. Jonathan, it didn't last the Jonathan. Then we didn't get a PhD. And in fact, some people are even saying now that for the APC pack, only one now, if it declares, they say, oh, it's only president PhD. But the point is that you have to be rigorous and first ask, what does the country need? And if you look at the history of countries, at different moments, a different kind of leadership may be needed. I recall Professor Brown of Oxford talked about you have redefining leaders, transformative leaders, transitional leaders, preserving leaders. So if a country is in a war, like have it in the UK, in Churchill, you have a leader who did well. After war, he lost. So the point here is, at this moment, we need a president. First, we need to define what is the challenges and what's the job description we need and what is the profile that fits it. So from that perspective, we'll not go and say, can the political process generate this kind of candidate? And so the problem with Nigeria, what people call the recruitment crisis, is not just that we don't have people who we may think are technocrats or we think are transformational in governance, is that the political process is trapped in what they now call rentier state, prebendalism, meaning you have a principal and agent and client. So people are elected, people have their, like these delegates, people have their own delegates. So that system will be difficult to have somebody break through. So, but nevertheless, in 2023, people are saying, okay, fine, maybe we need a new leader, a new wine in an old wine skin. So maybe can PDP, APC produce a different leader? Or do we need entire new wine skin, a new political party, the Third Force, the SDP, the ABGA, or some of the other 3 or 4, new parties that are not well established? Is it possible that, like you said in your intro, that these crises can trigger a significant shift? Are we in a revolutionary moment, which is defined by acute awareness of the problem, awareness that the system of the old can't deliver that problem, and the determination
so you need
to
break through it.
that level.
Very interesting indeed, and you've raised some important points. And Frank Tietie, let's talk about the issues of Nigerians having a job description. I mean, focusing on what's called JDs for the next president. A lot of people are saying that it's no longer enough for politicians to just come around and say, I want to be president. We need to give them a job description. This is what you're going in there for, and this is what you should solve. And if you don't solve it in 2 years, these are the parameters. In 1 year, these are the parameters. In 3 years, this is what may happen to you or the party. Or in 4 years, so and so may happen to you.
Let's not be necessarily idealistic. Such a thing doesn't happen in Nigerian politics. Center for Democracy and Development set up one thing called Buhari Meter to measure all of the promises that the APC made before President Buhari mounted the saddle in 2015. And it turned out that the current president failed woefully in fulfilling those promises, and nothing happened. In fact, he got re-elected in a landslide. So those things don't matter. Job description is defined by the reality of the times that we are facing at this time. Nigeria is worse off, more than the expectation of persons in 2015, and hope is fast being lost. In fact, there's fallenness across the land. So if you look at the various presidential declarations we just had, many of them were posturing themselves as solution providers. This will say, I am hope. This one will say, I'm a unifier. And I will say that I'm a continuity builder and all of that. What our country needs right now is survival. So someone who can take us through this unprecedented hopelessness that we have had as a country, this sense of distrust that the generality of the society has about government. People have lost interest. We talk about the electioneering process, the electoral process, the recruitment process. Many Nigerians are aloof. They've lost interest in that, because if you look at the general hope that was generated, that was engendered when President Muhammadu Buhari came on board in 2015, thinking that he would, as a military man, solve the Boko Haram crisis, and as an anti-corruption integrity czar, turn corruption into a thing of the past, and then the history today. So who else could be better than that can provide that hope that Muhammadu Buhari provided in 2015? So
yeah, sorry just to cut you short there. I just want to give an example of the sort of society we thought we were building, and which Buhari himself had thought his government was going to provide to Nigerians as a better alternative. There was a time when President Buhari was president-elect in 2015 that he had to be stopping for the traffic light. I mean, just to show example that he wanted to build a brand new country. I mean, when they drove, around, the city center here, he had to ask his convoy to stop. And a lot of Nigerians were actually happy with those kind of things. And there was this palpable fear among those who, had been looting and doing several things and so on, until we started seeing a lot of things.
You underestimate the the level of our value system, the degradation in our value system that doesn't encourage good leadership at all. Either the kind of leadership that pays obeisance to some form of, I would say, a feudal system that is prevalent in a section of the country, and then another section of the country that is based on what Professor refers to as prebendalism, sort of politics that is based on exchange of money, So the service culture, as far expected from leadership, is not there. It's a problem with value. And then the last person who attempted, not this president, the last person who attempted to give the impression that there is a form of servant leadership, there is a social contract that demands service from leadership to the people, was the former president Yar'Adua, who did it last. So I think the problem is about values. It is. When you talk about leaders, it's easy to blame the political class, but you forget that the political class, there is an expectation for the political class by the general citizenry, and it is that capture power and favor our religion, capture power and favor our region, capture power and favor us, and then share the money, let us have the contract. Until that value changes, we will not really get it right. And we're not seeing much of that acculturization, that reorientation going on right now among the political class and the citizenry. And so we should be expecting a problem come 2023.
Okay. Prof. Ahmed, what would you subscribe to? The idea of having job description, reviving it or reforming the sort of job description that the next president should have, and how he must follow it so that Nigerians can also monitor, and if there's room for punishment, and also punish whosoever doesn't attempt to do the right things they were voted for.
Yeah, I think maybe he's right to say we shouldn't build too much idealism around it. But the fact is, if you look at, oftentimes we say, let's blame the citizens, our value and culture. The real question is, how will you change this culture? And by the way, Nigerians are not impossible people to govern. Just like other people in the world, Nigerians are required to say signaling that something. I give you a simple example. Okay, first, I hold a view that it was a foolish hope for anybody to think that Buhari would change things. As of 2015, you've seen him before, and that's what it says is, look, when a person has held an office, his auditioning for the next office is not based on CV. It's based on performance scorecard. So oftentimes, it's a PhD, it's a professor of this, of law, of economics. That's the point. You're going to assess every candidate on what they have done in the last position that we are in. Because the skill set and the capabilities competent people manifest is not the function of book. So yes, in general, the question will now be, has he solved problems before? Or a governor, a president who will change things, has he shown capacity to understand corruption and fight it? So the point I'm talking about, I never had that kind of hope, but people had that kind of hope, and wrongly. And again, we're going to the same game again. People are going to have hope based on suggestions by based on other ethnic issues. In 2015, what happened was a coalition of people who have been out of power, very hungry, desperate, and smart enough to ride the wave of ethnicity, religion, the Chibok crisis, Governor President Jonathan's mismanagement of information management, mismanagement of information. And so there was a perfect storm to uphold the government, and they did that. They were even a ramshackle team. Before the first time finished, they had all broken. People like Tambuwad have left, people like Saraki have left, Atiku has left. So that was not a transformative moment. And that's very important. You have to need people come together and create an idea about the problem of the country and source within themselves people whose competencies, behaviors, temperament suggest capacity to deliver on that. If you look at, for example, the thought force, that's one of the thought force, by the way, is that there's no coherence around people. Kokoso is there, Tom is there, all kinds of characters are there. I'm actually there too. They put me as a
so it's a Nigerian problem, actually.
So there's no definition of what is it that this group stands for. And so, back to what he said, value. Yes, but Nigerians, when I was in NEC, briefly, just a small place, but we changed the behavior of NEC because we did those things. There are things we do in Nigeria today, corruption will end, or at least minimize. If they saw the president came to power, appoint officers, and appoint people who, at least on paper, are seen as not corrupt, not appoint people who, on paper, and actually have been indicted. And again, you move straight to reinforce your own speech. You talked about declaring your asset publicly. You talked about setting up the Council of Procurement. You go ahead and do those things. Now, the first, body language. And people said that body language was a sham. and people went back to their old behavior. So I believe that Nigerians can change, but we need the leadership that first is sincerely dedicated to those ideals, show those ideals and practice them, and then not go for the political payout. So you just want to use it rhetoric.
And that's where the media comes in. Exactly. And I want you to be very fair in assessing us too. As journalists, the media in Nigeria, what sort of role do we play in informing or misinforming Nigerians when it comes to leadership recruitment process?
The Nigerian media, I would say, in general, has thrived in very difficult circumstances. It has been able to
thrived financially.
no. Even financially, it's been very difficult. You know, we are excited, and that we have professional media houses that have been objective. A good example is Arise News. You know, I mean, applauded all around the world because of living up to its constitutional responsibilities. But difficult in the sense that it is thrived because the difficult situation is that we have a reticent president that you have to decode his body language all the time. He hardly speaks to the Nigeria, and often does that whenever he goes abroad. You know, so the reportage is not about news, trending news of what's happening, but in terms of, I need to recall the sharp and very I would say responsive media we had even in the Second Republic, as bad as it was, that could shape public opinion. Not only that, but also influence public policy. But the media of this time can hardly able to do that because it's unable to really secure the attention of the government, to the extent that we are talking about people who are voicing out the heartbeat of the persons. I mean the citizenry. The government, particularly this government has been quite aloof. It doesn't care. It does whatever it wants to do. Take, for example, the issue of the application of prerogative of mercy. You wonder whether, if the media does so much in reporting the heartbeat of the country every time, and to see whether or not it will influence either public opinion or public policy, and it does not, there should be every reason for it to be discouraged. But Nigerian media hasn't been discouraged. It's still doing what it has to do. I'm not saying that because I belong to the media. Because I also know the difficulty when it comes to Prof was saying that whether it's thriving well financially. No, because the situation is that we've seen the incursion of fake news and how much it has been used, whether for positive propaganda or negative propaganda, in favor of the ruling class against the citizenry. So the situation has been quite tough for the media.
Yeah, so,
yes.
So how do we get a media that helps to support a better recruitment drive for better leaders? And the focus is not just on the presidency alone. I mean, we have governors, we have senators, we have House of Rep members. Because, I mean, if the presidency is bad, for example, or the executive has problems, why don't we have a National Assembly that's active? Can we have, for example, a situation whereby the National Assembly is manned by the opposition and then the presidency or the executive is manned by one other political party? And how would sort of scenario play out?
Like you said, the media has always been a strong advocate for development, for justice, for human rights, democracy. Under the military, I mean, it has been a much respected institution. But again, which media? Okay, we saw the NSAS and saw the role Arise and a few other ones played. If you look at the US globally, media is under some question around the media. The US government is focusing on helping local media so that they can also generate democratic accountability locally. So if you look at our states, you discover that there's total collapse of democracy in many of the states, even worse than we're talking about national. But the problem with the media now is, still, for example, people are declaring for presidency, holding accountability and defining for citizens the issues without any merit about the individual merits. But if you're a Minister of Transport and a major train crisis happens and the Nigerians are still on hostage, you aren't qualified to declare for presidency for now. The focus will be to get those people out. And when they do, you ride on that positive outcome. Nowhere in the developed democracy in the world with a leader who, unfortunately, not your fault, or maybe your fault, those tragedies, you sink with it. For example, we're expecting Chris Ngige maybe to declare tomorrow or any of the days, okay? And schools are under lock and key. You can't do that in a functional democracy. Because that perception, this is your immediate task. So the job that the media should be doing now, I think, is to help citizens gain insight, not just reportage, and not just some kind of news, but insight. Why would somebody who is holding a portfolio and the major assignment is under crisis, and this is a country that is suffering? If you look at the economic indicators, social indicators, Nigeria is worse than they have ever been in 5 or 6 decades. I mean, look at the economic inflation. The world is suffering, but we're suffering more. More people, more Nigerians are going to the poverty bracket than anybody else in sub-Saharan Africa. Look at our borrowings. Look at the simple fact that almost all part of Nigeria is now almost like territories ungoverned.
Yeah, but sometimes
so at that point,
at that point, these things and the citizens are not interested in reading all these
it's not the way traffic. It's not about reporting alone. The media is not responsible to force citizens, but the media report shapes opinion. And by the way, don't think that citizens are not responding or understanding what they're saying. During the answers, the work that Arise News did was appreciated by citizens because they helped them gain insight. So my point was punished. No, that's part of the job risk. That's part of the professional risk. The point is this, that Abraham Lincoln said, Franklin or Jefferson said, where the people can read and write and the media is free, the democracy is safe. The notion is that if you can create what they call the journal of ideas, just like platforms like this, where people exchange ideas, and if it's not rigorous, and if the media is bought, some portion of the media are already trapped. And that's why we worry about both how media is organized, self-organization, professional discipline, and of course, again, very important, the rigor and the intelligence of the level of editorial level and analysis. Because critically, if you can't plumb into the crisis and help citizens gain insight, because citizens sit at their home, they don't have the access to information that you have.
So media content is very critical. Important. What sort of media content? Just before I come to you, he had raised one very important issue. Those who are still serving in government and haven't delivered on certain aspects, but they want to go into higher positions. Like, for example, Vice President Professor Yemi Oshibanjo is actually one who is a professor of law, and we saw what happened to Onogen in this same government that he's serving.
And the chairman of the economic team,
the chairman of the economic team, shouldn't we be basing our assessment of his decision to run for presidency based on this?
The question is, however correct that supposition is who bails the cat? Because Section 22 of the Constitution expressly places on the media the responsibility to hold government accountable to the people, not the National Assembly under Section 88. So that's an enormous responsibility, and we've always raised the issue that, okay, if you give the media such kind of responsibility, how do you now fund the media? Because you give a lot of money in billions, ridiculous number of billions to the National Assembly to hold government, to hold the executive accountable, and then it does not, it fails. And then you talk about the Nigerian media now having a constitutional responsibility under very harsh economic situations to hold both the National Assembly, the judiciary, and the executive responsible to the people. It's such a that's why I say it has thrived well under very difficult circumstances. It doesn't have all those resources. However, when you look at all of these, whether it's judged from Vice President Yemi Osinbajo through Chris Ogige and Amechi, the question therefore is, the role of the media is to report news the way it is, and actually to generate thoughts, questions for a thinking citizenry. There is no doubt that we have a citizenry that is lazy, that is laid back, to a large extent that has given up. Because if you look at the how feisty the 2015 elections were, how tempers rose, how expectations also rose. One would have thought that Nigeria would have been an Eldorado 4 years later. Now, 7 years later, Nigerians have lost hope. So how do you get them? They think that all of these things are more or less dress rehearsals for nothing. So we'll go back to that very important question. The kind of leader that will engender hope, that will manage the kind of unusual diversity that Nigeria is, and then the kind of problems it's facing right now.
Very interesting indeed. Like I had said earlier on, I mean, what the media is saying is what a lot of Nigerians are actually saying, that it's no longer good enough for you to just say you want to be president. Just like that. Absolutely. You need to be assessed on what you are bringing to the table that's new, fresh ideas, and all of that. Well, we'll have to go on a short break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the leadership recruitment process of the country. And our focus will now be on finding a competent leader and using certain metrics to get such kind of leaders. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horizon TV. I'm Somna Sambo. Now let's take a look at the issues of competence and capability when it comes to electing the right leaders that will stabilize the country. We know the aspirants vying to become president in the ruling party as well as the opposition party, the main opposition, which is the PDP. Now, can any one of them be the right person to take the country to its promised land, or can there be a paradigm shift in leadership choices away from the APC and the PDP? Well, my guests are still Arise analyst Frank Tietie, who is a lawyer, and Dr. Sam Amadi, who is an associate professor of law. Gentlemen, we now come to the issues of, metrics, that would use to judge people who have said that they want to rule this country. And do you think, very quickly, each of you, we have them only in the ruling parties? Let's start with you, Dr. Sam Amadi.
No, we don't. I mean, it's arguable that you could get some very strong candidates in the other parties. By the way, elections are not beauty contests. There's nothing that says, it's not like a general test where everybody signs in, you enter and you win. So in every country in the world, the best people may not even be on the ticket. So in the US, I know when Lee Iacocca, because of his great work with Chrysler Motors, everybody said, come be president of America. But he didn't become president. We've seen election, we've talked about Awolowo. Some people describe him then, Chief Awolowo, as the best president we never had. I think it was Kimber who I hope is a compliment. We didn't get him. The point is, and of course, what the Kwame and the Shehu Shagari, Kwame and Obasanjo, many people believe that the Kwame with his 2 PhDs, law, architect, has all it takes. And he showed it in the Constitutional Conference and the role he played. But he didn't get to be president. So there are obviously very strong candidates. Some will argue, people like maybe Obi Ezekwesili when she was running before, Kisimo Alo, and a host of other people don't know Pat Tommy if he becomes a candidate for Ghana, Jega, who wants to be maybe a candidate of PRP or whatever. But very important, democracy says people will vote for you. And the advantage of a ruling party or a big party is that they have the resources, what they call muscle, to build that candidacy and take it around the country.
The structure.
The structure.
People call structure in Nigeria.
It could be finance, it could be network, people. And I've always argued, see, democracy requires that people vote for you. You don't just presumptively become the candidate. So if you have a party, and that party cannot spread, and that party cannot advertise itself and convince Nigerians to vote for it, you don't have to be president. Again, the other question is, why can't these self-acclaimed transformative candidates outside the PDP and APC also go to the main party and kind of challenge leadership? Because part of getting there is challenge and win. And let me tell you why it's possible. You see, modern democracies converge on the 2-party model, either by law or by default, because public choice economists will argue, have people vote. So normally, people come to the center. So the center of the left, center of the right. So you look all over the world, there are always 2 dominant parties. And what that means, therefore, and it's good for democracy, it creates stability. So you know that this party is in the wing. So it becomes a disciplinary pressure.
In waiting, like exactly. Said in parliamentary
exactly. So what that means, therefore, is that why can't you go in? Democracy is about dialogue, about changing things by convincing people. So I'm not giving up on the fact that Kisimo Alu and Obi Ezekwesili, all of these parties told me them, can patiently reform these parties and take them over. And when I was running for governor in 2018, I had to look for a major party APGA in the Southeast. Of course, there are 10 small parties that came to me and said, right or not, but I know I'm also going to win the election. So the realism is, look, it will take extraordinarily gifted, transformative character with national appeal, like maybe Ashiwaju, for example, someone at that level, leaving the ruling party, a major party, and taking a small party to win a presidential election.
All right. We saw something like that in between 2006 and 2007 when Atiku Abubakar, then vice president, had problems with former President Olusegun Obasanjo, his principal then, and he moved to the Action Congress. And eventually, we saw the figures that came out of that, as in a strong politician leaving any of the bigger parties and then going to a smaller one, just like you had said. Now, let's talk about some of these metrics in terms of competence, merit, track record, the viability of some of these strong leaders. Do you think that Nigerians would want to leave these 2 big political parties, APC and PDP, and maybe push a very strong message in 2023 by getting someone from other political parties?
Nigerians would have wished they had a third alternative to the two political parties we currently have, because these two political parties now have a long history of failure to meet the expectations of Nigerians. Unfortunately, we don't have persons who are prepared to provide that alternative to Nigerians. The same way, like I was trying to get Prof's buy-in before the program started, the same way we saw in the desperation and strategic engagement which the APC made pre-2015 and saw them taking over power. So it's a note of disappointment on the part of these persons who do not appear to be realistic. Whether I don't want to mention this, Prof has mentioned the number, quite a number of them. Who it's not really about an intellectual game alone or prowess. That's really what Nigeria needs now. What our country needs so badly, and I mentioned it before, it's an ability to manage this diversity, this large population, this confused population of persons who have mutual, seemingly internal mutual suspicions about one another in terms of pursuing political destinies. So, and such kind of internal fighting is what has bogged us down. That's why we haven't made progress until. So, we need that leader who is able to unite the people. Unfortunately, I don't want to use expensive television time to endorse anybody. But I must quickly say that we haven't seen them, because it's either that kind of person that can, demystify and reduce the ethnic and religious tensions that we have, and then give a sense of Nigerianness to these highly diversified persons that make up this country, Nigeria, until we find that kind of individual. And we haven't been seeing them working hard enough on those things. Someone who comes, and we had a lot of them, whether in the First Republic, even in the Second Republic, unfortunately, even when we had, parties formed along regional lines, we had an MPN that was organized in such a manner that gave, a nationalistic outlook to every Nigerian that belonged to that party. And even when it won the election, there was a sense of being Nigerian. But we lost that so quickly. So that's the individual we need. And most unfortunately, and I would say on such a disappointing note, these third force, they have not worked on that. Rather, what I think that I take up your challenge when you say we are into solution-oriented journalism tonight. What I can say is that then there becomes a very urgent need for negotiations among these persons who
building of political alliances.
Yes, so that we can now begin to think of, because we can't do without the two-party system. It's prevalent. It's hard to really have a third party coming on board at this time, especially now that we didn't see any work as we build up to June 3rd, the end of the primaries. So we need to see negotiations with individuals, persons, coalitions coming together with expectations in a particular political party, appealing to Nigerians, giving the sense of nationalism that, we are together and we can deliver it. When we have that kind of person, and I think Pastor Temi was working out something like that.
Yeah, they were doing this force.
Yes. But you see, Pastor Temi is living in dreamland if he thinks he can do without what we call the structure in PDP or APC today. Can you underestimate the power of the incumbency? A political party that goes into election controlling the police, controlling the army, controlling the treasury. Can you do without that? So you see, there needs to be that conscientization of the fact that we need to save Nigeria. We need to have a Nigeria of our own. Just like Peter told them, some of you can no longer go on as old men going to Europe to go and wash plates. So you need to take care of this country, because if this country implodes, you are going to suffer. So that sense of urgency to save this country should drive them to get a consensus. All right. But the consensus shouldn't be, what we have in terms of consensus leadership, or when there will be no more primaries, or where the president will anoint one person. No.
All right. What sort of political class do we have in the Fourth Republic? Because you have said about the First Republic, the Second Republic, you could see people eager to forge political alliances. You could see, for example, in the Second Republic and Nnamdi Azikiwe, you could see what happened when the NPN was becoming a huge challenge to them. You could see Awolowo and all of that trying to build UPN, forging alliances here and there. But in this Fourth Republic, it's been difficult. It looks like if you're not in the APC, you're not in the PDP, it looks like you've been pushed aside, and then it doesn't give you the strength to be able to call other. Look at SDP and APGA. Why can't they merge together? Okay. They are the third and fourth largest political party, and then maybe look for this other political party. Why is it difficult for consensus among the politicians and not in the mainstream parties?
Well, you should know that even the First, Second Republic, we had frontline, mainline parties. We had United Middle Belt Congress. We had Aminu Kano's Northern proposed,
Congress, MPC.
Yeah, the Northern People's Congress was
the
there.
party, but he had his own Northern Element
Progressive Union, NEPU, and all of that.
Northern Element Progressive Union. So we already have these parties that are marginalized, and somehow some of them become maybe close to mainstream. And sometimes they come on alliance for a particular election.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the 1964 election, they built a very strong alliance, for example.
What has changed is, you see, the political dynamics have changed, because in the sense that democratization and the presidential system of government creates a different model of winner takes all, first past the post. So what we have taken now, a model, executive presidency, does not give, it's a win-lose. So if you didn't win, you lost. The parliamentary model was a little bit win-win. Now, second point is that some of the politicians, the problem is that everybody's targeting to win the presidency. So, for example, the third force could be an incubator of transformation by having people run for governor, senate on that platform. And then they become a strong voice. And then they upstage the main parties because of their failure. So like somebody argued, if I assume that PDP lost because they failed before 2015, APC has failed double, so they should lose. So if both PDP and APC are not good, then if there was a third party that had up to 5 senators, 20 House of Reps members, maybe 2 governors, that party can sop up other smaller movements, Labour, NSAS groups, and then now after 1 or 2 electoral cycles, we'll be in a position to displace PDP or APC at the presidency. Now, the way these younger revolutionaries, quote unquote, are thinking about politics is that they want, we have to have a president to upset. That's not the government.
Yeah,
is
and
so
which
big.
is the danger? I mean, you don't see all of them going to Senate or House of Reps. They just want to be president.
So if a party says our focus is to have 4 or 5 young people, you're talking about youths now. People say, oh, we want more women. Why can't you field women in your party? And let your small party be a party that says we're targeting strong women across the country, 6 of them, who have the capability, who have the, some women are so very popular. So they win. So I have always argued that it's immoral to form a party today. I want to win the presidency. Even Robert Wade, who won in Senegal after 4 attempts, built over time. President Buhari, who was not winning after the Northern Nigeria, he never won outside that place. But today he's a president, 2 times president. So the quick question is, do we have enough political discipline and leadership to go back and say, look, this is a process. A nation is not a day, 8 years, 1 year. If we want to change Nigeria and present a real alternative disruptive ideology, then let's incubate it with younger people in parliament, House of State Assemblies, and over time, people like Nigerians are confused. Oh, PDP doesn't look so rosy. APC has failed us. So they will sit back and say, this party that has shown what they can do in 2 states, then that's how you replace. So you now get back to 2 de facto party again. Maybe APC becomes minority, or becomes the third party, or PP becomes. So you now have that new party, plus the party that upstage in the election, and the other one will be third. So this quarrel, who becomes second and first,
yeah, will always be there. Okay, very interesting conversation you've had there, Doctor. Now, let's look at Nigeria today. Are you seeing that sort of election fever that you saw sometime around 2014/2015, that there was going to be a paradigm shift, as in a new government was going to come to power? Everywhere you go to, there was that song of change. No. Are you seeing that sort of atmosphere in the country?
No. Well, Nigerians are actually traumatized now with this high speed of insecurity and the seeming helplessness on the part of the government and the sense of lack of accountability by the government to the people. So Nigerians are wondering whether the electoral process whether yields anything at all. So that's why this kind of opportunity that would have been a fertile ground for a new leader that will give that paradigmatic change that is needed, it's missing. I know that, yes, I agree with Prof that there needs to be the time of incubation for some newness to come on board. But how do we explain when you have new leaders like Emmanuel Macron forming from nowhere, from the blues, to take over a republic like France?
I mean,
but you see, again, we are missing something. So those of you, people like Prof who are into social research can determine the level of voting bloc that we have right now in our country. So it has to do with the large number of women and large number of young people. So what's happening to the organization of women and youth in terms of delivering change? So these are the people who actually need a good governance in Nigeria. They seem very aloof and unconcerned.
Well, so a lot of people say they are comfortable with being SAs, SSAs, and all of that, and they don't want to form that revolutionary
of the social media. And unfortunately, it is not being maximized by the people who are using it, who actually even need good governance. So when you tell me that, and as a matter of fact, the election fever is so low, and is an indication of, I don't want to use, it's become trite when you say it's hopelessness. But you see, it's as if a high degree of disinterestedness. So somebody
is it to the advantage of APC? For example, can the APC cash in on this and then still win election?
It's unfortunate. You raised the issue which we haven't dealt with sufficiently, that we have a large number of persons who do not qualify to declare for to run for Nigeria's presidency, who are actually being the subject matter of the day. So it is because these matters are not sufficiently being discussed even in social media, and I think so. I agree with you. It is to the advantage of the APC, because if the social media and these young persons and then groups, generally including women groups, are that sensitized to know that these guys are the ones holding the keys to our failure, they are the ones responsible for the failure of the present situation, they would not even dare to contest.
And Doctor, I remember in 2014/2015, you could see PDP leaders under tension everywhere. The atmosphere was just, like they just knew that they were going to lose the election. So the best thing that they could do is to salvage the best part of the ship that they could. How many governors are we going to try to retain, at least, even if we don't get the presidency and all of that? Now, how do Nigerians get into such a fever? Because we are going to a succession presidency where President Buhari is not going to be a matter here. The only thing that the APC has going for it is that it's the ruling party now. How do we approach this election with the thinking that as a succession presidency that the president doesn't have a stake, that something good can come out of it? There could be a revolutionary change that could help the country get better leaders, not just at the presidential level, but even governors, senators, House of Rep members, and all of that.
I think the key is to build back civic consciousness and activism. This is a low energy politics we're running now. You are very right. If you look at 2014, the APC did smart things. They were able to whip up sentiment and interpret government failure, even exaggerate it. PDP is failing hugely in interpreting, even not talk about exaggerating government failure.
That's the use of propaganda, if I may put it rightly.
Propaganda always sounds as if it's negative. But the point is, look, you have to interpret what's going on. Think, for example, the security crisis. Is it just a Buhari failure, chronic as it is, or is it a failure of a party that ought to have strategies, that ought to enable the president to govern well? So PDP is not very much playing the role of a good opposition in that sense. The second thing is civil society. In 2014, civil society was actively opposed to government, but they went to bed with APC in the build-up to their victory. And today they are suffering from internal conflict. The civil society people are conflicted because they are part of the government. So they will speak in muted tongue. And I think, for example, civil society people go to the National Assembly to lay siege for failure of women votes. The National Assembly, the Senate parent is APC, the House of Reps speaker is APC, APC control majority, the federal government is APC. They don't rail against APC. They go and keep night vigil. So the point is that the civil society itself is demobilized because it got itself into a
very quickly before we run off the conversation.
Demoralized, disappointed in itself. They were disappointed in itself, being misled by itself. So the civil society also needs a salvation, needs some form of salvation.
So they are conflicted.
Yes, so civil society is some form. Civil society, organized civil society, I would say, as it were in 2015, it's not as the same in.
2015 they were combating against government. 2022, they are feeling part of the responsibility for this crisis, and therefore they speak on double mind. Oh,
maybe APC has found a way of actually getting the best out of the civil society in the country.
I can tell you that it is reeling out of self-disappointment. Civil society is not happy, and right now it lacks the moral conscience to be able to address Nigerians about certain things. However, we can't allow the situation to just slide by like that.
Absolutely. Okay. Very quickly, I've been told that I don't have enough time left. I just want to ask you individually, have you seen any aspirant who is saying anything novel, something different from what we have heard in the past presidential elections or aspirations for presidential ticket and all of that in all the presidential aspirants we've seen from
honestly,
all political parties?
I've always said the truth. I think even the small parties like Kisima, Aludem and others, it's only P2B who has tried to talk about shutting down the rentier states. He has not gone into the more complex
details.
issues. So far, nobody said anything new. There are candidates who may bring newness because of who they are, but they have not yet started. Maybe this is the primary. They are speaking to the constituencies, the votes. But so far, nobody, in my view, has brought anything that's new and focused at disrupting.
Yeah, that could get a lot of Nigerians to have that sort of election fever. Have you seen that person?
I haven't seen. There was a lot of hope for Nigeria when it was born in 1960, 1963, that it was going to be the greatest country in Africa and a world-class country. And it was because of the sort of leaders that it had at that time, And we haven't seen any close to those set of leaders in this current dispensation. So I haven't seen any. And my greatest fear is that I want a country that is going forward, that has a sense of being together, and we haven't seen that individual yet.
We just hope that after the party primaries
but there
in
are
May,
candidates that may rise to the occasion to the
when they emerge, when the candidates emerge in May after the party primaries,
now,
maybe we may be hearing those sort of rhetoric. But we must thank you so much. Frank Tietie is a lawyer and Arise News analyst, and Dr. Sam Amadi is Arise News analyst and associate professor of law. We must thank you so much for providing this insight, and we hope a lot of Nigerians will look at competence, merit, track record, and the viability of the candidates or the aspirants being offered, who have offered themselves at the moment as we head to the general elections. Well, that's how it's been for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye and thank you for watching. I'm Summer Sambo.